Hi, Mitchell here with the Chapter 3 summary. And Chapter 3 was way more about the media landscape um, for sports. And we'll start off with talking about the introduction to the chapter, which kind of overarches or makes the overarching point, the subtleness or the subtle backstory to the chapter, which is kind of how sports has been covered, but how the shift is now going towards online. We see that with the quote, as of 2016, 34 national sports networks existed, along with an even greater number of regional networks, and yet television was still losing overall media share metrics to the internet. So while still TV has a huge presence, um, TV's dropping. It's not a sharp fall off, but TV is starting to lose ground to the internet. We've seen that last few years, not even with sports. It's what we call cable cutters. People are preferring to go online and pay less money for basically a better deal. With TV, you have to pay this big package for all these channels, and you don't even want all these channels, but you have to pay for a whole package of them, and you still get commercials, whereas you can go on Netflix or Hulu or any of these other streaming services, and you can pick exactly what you want to watch because you're paying only, now it's like $12, $13 a month for Netflix, but you get a bunch of shows that you want to watch, and you get no commercials. So we see that now with the sports, is that's kind of how sports has also maintained their popularity, is they've been able to adapt. They've been decent at adapting, not the best at adapting, but they're not the worst. They're not too stingy about adapting towards new media. And we've seen the shift with, if you have a cable provider, or you don't always have to have a cable provider, you can still buy a service that allows you to watch and stream all sports games. So, it's the NBA, it's the League Pass, MLB is at bat, I believe. And I forget the other one. I forget football and hockey, but you can pay a certain amount of money per season to get these sports streaming services. And so that's kind of where that's what chapter is talking about, is how the media landscape is shifting towards as online as possible because it's much more convenient. So then we'll go into another big takeaway, which would be kind of more on that a little bit, but how we see a shift in not just the streaming of these sports, but also the coverage. The quote being, first, regarding the traditional print media outlets, mainly newspapers and magazines, sports media looks very different from that of even 10 to 15 years ago. There are far fewer beat reporters who travel with the team. So that's the end of the quote. So what that's kind of just talking about how is, in the olden days, you would have reporters follow teams on, they were newspaper reporters, and they would just follow teams around, and they'd have the inside scoop, they'd have the connections to get good quotes, they'd make friends, and generally just be friendly around these guys to get the story, and it was kind of a connection, a unique connection. But now you have all these guys on Twitter who can just send out a breaking news or rumors or, things in the works at an instant, and not have to write a newspaper or travel with the team. You have Adam Schefter in the NFL. You have Adrian Wojnarowski in the NBA. You have, I think it's Ken Rosenthal in the MLB. Like, you have these very high up reporters who don't have to follow a team. They can send out breaking news in an instant on Twitter. And that's where that's going. That's what that's kind of talking about here in chapter 3, is just that how the coverage of sports has changed with online, or with the internet. So then my third takeaway it was just kind of the loss of magazines in general. Magazines, not as magazines are an interesting one because I think it's probably my generation or maybe the one right before my generation, depending on what generation you put me in, is kind of where magazines, like, I can't grasp exactly how popular magazines were, but they must have been pretty popular. But it's kind of like, I'm sorry, so I'll just say the quote here. The quote is, regarding magazines, several mainstream magazines remain, with Sports Illustrated and ESPN the magazine leading the way. However, other prominent magazines have moved into online-only formats, such as the Sporting News moving to a daily digital format in 2011. So this is another part of adapting. I think 2011 is maybe a little too late, but that's, neither here nor there. It's kind of going back to the subtle overarching theme of the chapter, which is it's adapting to the internet. And magazines, which must have been very popular, they aren't going to really survive, because the only time I ever really see magazines is at the barber shop or the doctor's office. And so you see this with magazines wanting to keep their format of, having pictures and interviewing people, is they had to move to an online format to survive, because it's cheaper, because you don't have to make all those prints of the magazine, but you can still sell your products for the same price because you're not selling the paper, you're selling the content. So moving on to number 4. This comes from the interview with Anne Pegararo, Director, Institute for Sport Marketing, Laurentian University, talking about how sports fans were the first to engage with social media. She says, a quote from Anne is, "Sport fans were one of the first groups to engage with social media in a substantial way." And this goes back to the whole point of the class, the communication aspect, talking about how people communicate with each other, how sports brings people together to give them a community, to give them connections, to make friends. People were able to, whether it was go watch highlights, go talk and discuss sports, go debate, do whatever they wanted, but they were able to use social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, like all these social media platforms have allowed sports fans, I've spent nights watching Cincinnati Reds games, Pacer games, Colts games, Blackhawks games, spending them in Reddit threads with other fans of my team that I like. And those have been some really fun nights where we all kind of get into a online thread and just kind of make comments, complain, make jokes, just be very friendly to each other. And that's some of the best times I've had, I think, online, just with people, just friendly people, like-minded people, in a just coming together to just watch a baseball game and kind of just chat about it like we were all there together. And that's just kind of what that's talking about, is how sports fans really held on to the social media. And then the last point comes in the conclusion of the chapter with kind of reiterating the fact that it's all about adapting. It's all about evolving, because, we think that the internet is going to be the top thing forever. That's kind of generalizing, but I'm sure there are people who think that the internet is it. Like, that's where everything's going to go. But, I'm sure the people thought that radio was be-all, end-all. And then TV came out, and that was the be-all, end-all. And now we have the internet, and that's the be-all, end-all. There might be something more than the internet that gets invented or gets discovered or we realize it's there. But the quote being, "Much of the future of sports media will align with the rest of media evolution, with the keywords being integration and convergence." And the most that's the end of the quote, but the most popular thing or the most ideal thing is to evolve. You have to evolve. People who don't adapt, that's where the quote comes from, is adapt or die. People for the sports to maintain their multi-billion-dollar industry, every league, is to make sure that they evolve with the media, with new technological advances, innovations, whatever is trending, whatever is solid for economic or commercial use. Sports needs to make sure that they evolve with technology to stay current and keep their fans. Thanks.